Glory to Jesus Christ, glory forever. You have heard it said, and I repeat unto you, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. Now this expression is not a circumlocution. It's not self-referential. It's not like that other saying that we often hear. It is what it is. As if to say what the thing is sufficient unto itself, such that no further commentary is necessary or fitting. Or another sacred circumlocution, the name of God. I am that I am. For no other comment on the name is necessary or fitting. That God is enough and is his name. But this one's a bit different. You don't know what you don't know. That is to say, oftentimes we find ourselves unaware of what we don't know, but in a kind of mistaken sense of our own knowledge. We think we know something. We think we understand something, but there is a sufficient amount that we don't understand, that we are not aware of, that we don't understand, that it brings about an even greater ignorance. To think we know when we do not is a greater ignorance than to not know, but to know that we don't know. Socrates famously said, the greatest wisdom is to know when and what you don't know. Of this gospel passage, it's possible to read this narrative account and suppose that we know what's going on. It's possible. It seems straightforward enough, and in many ways, that's true. I'm not going to offer any thoughts today on what is perhaps apparent, what we know that we know about today's gospel passage. But perhaps for some, I'll offer some insights on what you didn't know, you didn't know. This gospel passage, I would propose, is about three things. Three things. I'm going to offer these three things. I'm going to sketch how the gospel passage reflects this, and then I'll come back to these three things and make one further comment. This gospel passage is number one about Jesus is God incarnate as man. Jesus is God incarnate as man. Number two, Jesus came to undo the curse of Adam and heal his sin. Number two, Jesus came to undo the curse of Adam and heal the sin of Adam. Number three, Jesus came to raise Adam from the dead and restore all creation. Number three, Jesus came to raise Adam from the dead and restore all creation. I would propose that this gospel passage is about these three things. And if you're reading and listening to the passage, you could rightly ask the question, I don't see that. I've been able to see from birth, but I've never seen these things in this passage. Let me begin by citing one word at the beginning of this passage that will open up for us everything else. The key to this passage, I would suggest, is found in one simple word. It begins by telling us that as Jesus and his disciples were walking along, they encountered a man blind from birth. What we don't see in the English, what we don't know that we don't know, is the Greek that underlies this. This word from birth, that he was blind from birth, this Greek word is a word you'll recognize. The word is Genesis. It's Genesis. So from here on out, I'm going to refer to a man who was blind from Genesis. Now, what's the book of Genesis about? I'm going to suggest that John chapter 9, which is what we've just heard, is deeply, intimately connected with the opening chapters of the book of Genesis. And we are blind to what John chapter 9 is all about unless we see and we know that it's about the opening chapters of Genesis. See, shortly after the beginning of chapter 2 in Genesis, this is where we get this word that you'll recognize, this word Bible. This word Bible, it comes from Genesis chapter 2. It says, this is the Biblos. Which is to say, this is the book. This is the Biblos of creation. This is the book. The book of Genesis is the account of the creation and then the fall of Adam and Eve. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. This is a passage and a teaching on Genesis. The God who said, "Let there be light," has come as a man. And he has come to undo the curse of Adam. And he has come to heal the wound of sin, to raise Adam from the dead and restore all creation. This is what it's about. So Jesus encounters a man blind from Genesis. And so the disciples ask Jesus, fully expecting an answer. So, this man is blind from his origin. This has to be the curse of sin. So who sinned? This man or his parents? We get another echo from Genesis. Who was this man's parents? It's a mystery. His parents are Adam and Eve. The parents of all are Adam and Eve. This man is blind because his parents, Adam and Eve, sinned, but that's not the question his disciples were asking. They were asking, his immediate parents. So Jesus said, no, it's not because his parents sinned that this is a curse owing to the sin of his parents in the way that they were asking the question. Now, what's really interesting, and you can puzzle over this one, they ask, is it because he sinned? Now think this through, cause and effect. He was blind from his origin. How could he have sinned and then as a result receive the curse of blindness if he was blind from his very origin? You see the problem? Well, Jesus says, no. It's not because either he or his parents sinned. It's so that God's works might be revealed in him. God's works, we're back to Genesis. As we walk through those first couple of chapters of the book of Genesis, we encounter the works of God. Guess what word is used in the Gospel of John for works? The same Greek word that is used to describe the works of God in creation. God is working to create. God is accomplishing things. This man who was blind from Genesis is going to have revealed in him the God of Genesis who creates. You see, it's interesting. Jesus spits on the ground and he makes mud. So the idea, the picture here is we have some dry, dusty dirt. He adds a bit of moisture in the form of his spit. He smears it around, rubs it together, and makes mud. Guess what the word is that's used for making mud in John? It's the same Greek word that's used over and over and over and over throughout Genesis when God is making this and that and this and that and this and that through the 6 days of creation until God makes Adam. So Jesus makes something. You see, you don't know what you don't know, and so many times we mistakenly think that the prohibition of work on the Sabbath means you get a day off. 6 days of the week, you toil and trouble and do things you don't like. But thanks be to God, on one day, you get a day off and you can do what you want. I'm reminded of the expression from the psalm today, my cup runneth over. You know that's a Hebraism, you know what it means? For your cup to runneth over. It's a Hebraism, it's a figure of speech. It means to be inebriated. Isn't that great? Some of you, your cup may have runneth over on Friday, making quite merry for St. Patrick's Day. I don't know. Look, it's a special time. The Hebrew tradition is, with great respect for those who abstain from all alcohol. Truly, with great respect. The Hebrew tradition is not a teetotaling tradition. It's punctuated by times of joy and merriment. And at times, God provides that the cup may runneth over. But the Sabbath is not about a time where you get a day off, where you get to do whatever you want. That's not it, right? God was creating. He was doing the work of creation, the acts of creation. And then when that was complete, what was indicated was completion. God had a completed work of creation. And so the creation was done. It is finished. So he could rest. The Hebrew tradition has always understood the Sabbath is to refrain from acts of creation. Not just a time where you get a break from toil and trouble and do whatever you want. So sometimes people might say, well, this isn't, quote unquote, this isn't work to me, so I can do it. Well, look, that's not what the Sabbath is, right? It's refraining from the acts of creation so that you can follow after the pattern of God himself, who having completed the creation, was then in a state of rest. But we find out that this is the Sabbath day. Now we have a problem. This is the Sabbath, and God in the flesh, as Jesus is engaged in a work of creation. You see the problem? He's creating mud. That much is explicit in the text. But the Holy Fathers of the Church have always read this to say something a bit more. That in making mud, Jesus created eyes. This man born blind, he was born without eyes. This is a real medical condition. It still exists. You can look it up. To be born without eyes. You can't heal what's not there. It's not there at all. So Jesus made mud. And he put the mud into those empty eye sockets. And he created eyes that were not there. And now you understand why it was said, has it ever been seen in the history of all creation that a man born without eyes has been made to see? It has never been seen because it's impossible. You can't heal what's not there. Who is this that can create? Who can create? He says the amazing thing is, you don't know who this is. He just created something. It's never been seen before. Who is he? Jesus sends the man to wash in the pool of Siloam. Siloam, this word Siloam, it's very important. This is a fountain southeast of Jerusalem. The Hebrew root word is shalach. Shalach. It's a common Hebrew word. It's used again and again and again and again. We're back to Genesis. This word shalach, it means to send. To send. And when this word Siloam, shalach, when it's translated into the Greek, it's translated as the word from which we get the word you'll recognize, apostle. Apostle. It means apostle because the apostles are the sent ones. They're sent by God. Just as Jesus said, the one who sent me to do his works. What kind of works? The kind of works in Genesis. Those kinds of works. So he sends him to this pool called to be sent. Shalach, the pool of Siloam. Just to give you a hint of how this word is used, this word shalach in Genesis, it's used when God says, oh no, now they've eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now, lest they reach their hand forth, they send their hand forth to the tree of life and live forever. I've got to prevent that. Right? To send their hand forth to the tree of life. It's used then, so God says, so to prevent them from sending their hand to the tree of life, I'm going to send them out of Eden. So God sends Adam and Eve out of Eden, Shalach, Siloam. It's used to describe when Noah sends forth the raven from the ark, and when he sends forth his hand to receive back the raven back into the ark. It's used when Abraham has his son Isaac, and Abraham sends forth his hand with the knife to his son. And the angel comes and says, Abraham, do not send forth your hand with the knife to your son. That's this Hebrew word. It's used hundreds of times in Genesis and throughout the Old Testament. So he goes to this spring. We're back in Genesis. What did God place in Eden? He placed a spring of water that he sent forth. And it sent forth to give life to all living things throughout Eden. It breaks up into 4 different major streams. By the way, how many Gospels are there? 4. This wasn't lost on the fathers either. I've got to leave so much out. A spring of water goes forth with life. That's what God sends forth to give life in Eden. And so, Jesus, who is God incarnate, has just created eyes that weren't there and sends this man to a spring of water called sent. Siloam, or this word apostle, he sends him there. Jesus, having referred to himself as having been sent by God to do the works of God. And what else was the story of Adam and Eve about? The serpent comes and says, No. It is not that in dying you will die. It is that your eyes will be opened. And you will be able to see like God's. Your eyes will be opened. God said, No. Your eyes are not going to be opened. In dying you will die. By the way, that's literally what the text says. In dying you will die. It's this double death language. In dying you will die. And so here's this man, right, from Genesis. He's blind, and his eyes are certainly not opened, but now they are going to be opened. God creates eyes and opens them. And they keep pressing this man. Okay. You claim that you were blind from your Genesis, and now you claim you can see. Well, who was this? Who was this that did this to you? And they even ask, who is this man that was supposedly blind from birth? And now he can see. Who was this? And everyone kept saying, well, I don't know. What was the tree in the garden that Adam and Eve partook of? The tree of the knowledge of good and evil? And they don't know. They keep saying this, I don't know. But the man born blind says something in Greek that is stunningly arresting. He says, in answer to the question, who's the man? He says, ego eimi. And they ask him repeatedly, so he answers repeatedly. Ego eimi. What does it mean? I am. We heard that name at the beginning of this homily. Who is he? The answer keeps coming. I am. That's who it is. That's who's in question. Who's the man that created eyes and did something that has never been done since the creation of the cosmos? I am that I am created eyes. And we hear it again and again and again. And so the Pharisees suggest, well, we know that Moses heard the voice of God, but this man, we don't know who it is. And so we get echoes of this dialogue with Adam and Eve and the serpent. Did God really say? Right, it's almost as if the serpent says, yeah. Well, God said that to you, but I say unto you. And so it's almost as if the Pharisees are feigning being the faithful voice. Well, we listen to Adam. As to who this other man is, we don't know. For all we know, this is the voice of another serpent. But of course, it's the inversion. The Gospels are full of inversions. And we meet an inversion at the end of this passage. And all of these people are being afraid of being put out of the synagogue. They're being afraid of being cast out. Again, from Genesis, Adam and Eve were cast out of Eden. And so they are afraid of being cast out of the synagogue. And finally, after this inquisition that this man born blind has to go through, it says that they cast him out. Get out of here. Go. And just as Adam and Eve were cast out of Eden, God comes and finds them. And God asks them a devastating question. Where are you? We hid because we were afraid. But Jesus, having heard that he had been cast out of the synagogue, Jesus comes and finds him. But he asks a different sort of a question. He says, do you believe in the Son of Man? Do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is this that I might believe? You've seen him. This man is in the first moments of ever seeing in his entire life with eyes that were created. And Jesus says, you've seen him. You've heard him. He's the one standing before you. And Jesus says, look, I've come for judgment. I've come for judgment. The Hebrew concept of justice is that what is wrong will be made right. Every time when in the Hebrew scriptures it's talking about judgment and the justice of God, it's talking about that which is wrong being put to rights. And Jesus says, I've come for this judgment, that is to say, I have come to put things to rights, that those who do not see will be made to see, and those who see will be made not to see. And we're back in Genesis. We're back in Genesis. Remember, the serpent told Adam and Eve, if you eat it, your eyes will be opened. Their eyes were not opened. At least not in the way that might have been beneficial to them. Now, Genesis says their eyes were opened all right, but they were opened in such a way that it says that they recognized their nakedness. This is a different kind of a mystery for another time. But what we know is that in their eyes being opened, a darkness came into their eyes. And Jesus comes to take the eyes that are closed and open them. But those whose eyes have been opened in this serpentine way, their eyes will be closed. The serpentine opening of the eyes, those eyes will be closed. But the eyes closed because of the darkness that entered, because of the curse of Adam and Eve, those eyes will be opened. It's the inversion. And so I want to conclude where I began. Jesus is revealed in this chapter. And it harkens to that passage that was from our Old Testament reading, where we hear of the 8 sons of Jesse. And it was not the 7 sons that by the vision of the eyes, it would seem as though surely it must be the eldest, one of the first 7. But it wasn't. It says that God doesn't look at the outward appearance, but God sees the heart. God sees what is hidden, but what is true. And so we get an inversion of expectations there. It's little David. Jesse and 7 of his 8 sons came to the sacrifice. David the youngest didn't get to be there. He was out watching the sheep. We get the impression that because he was yet the youngest, he was stuck with it. Dad and the older brothers got to go to the sacrifice. David was stuck watching the sheep. But he was the one. The inversion of expectations. And so in the revealing of Jesus, we see in this passage that Jesus is God incarnate as man. Who is it? Who is it? Who is it? I am. That's who it is. Jesus came to undo the curse of Adam and to heal the wound of sin of Adam. That's what Jesus is healing here. That's what Jesus is undoing here. And Jesus came to raise Adam from the dead and restore all creation. This is the God who enters into the darkness of the void. He enters into the man born blind. He enters into the man who was blind from Genesis. Who is the man blind from Genesis? Adam. That's Adam. That's all of us. We are the men blind from Genesis. At the promise our eyes would be opened, they were closed. Jesus comes to the darkness as only I am can do. Comes where the darkness broods. And he speaks to the darkness, "Let there be light." And the works of God are completed by he who is the light of the world. May God grant this prayer. If Jesus has come to you to grant you the gift of faith, that you were blind, that your eyes might be opened, please pray with me. Almighty God, grant that we may always recognize that we are blind from Genesis, that the dark waters of chaos and death would seek to overcome us, that we would be lost in death. But let us see the light that shines in this world. God, grant that we may have our eyes opened. Give us eyes to see and open them. Grant that we may wash in the waters of the pool of Siloam, that we may be sent as your sent ones to share testimony of this light. That what we know is we were blind from Genesis, but now we see. And this is our testimony. And we know who you are. You are God come in the flesh, come to raise us from the dead and restore all creation. O God, grant us this gift of faith. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy upon us and save us. Amen.